Whether your team is your family, your business, or your employees, staying connected is crucial. You can depend on the Cross Insurance family
Very good.
to provide the best insurance solutions for you. We've got your team protected. Visit crossagency.com today.
Hi, welcome to GlobeDocs presents Long Live Rock, Celebrate the Chaos. My name is Maura Johnston, and I'm a Globe contributor. I write the Omnipop column for the music section, and I'm also an adjunct professor at Boston College. This evening I'll be talking to Jonathan McHugh, director of Long Live Rock, but before we get into our conversation, I'd just like to let everybody know a couple of important things. Number one, your link to view the movie that you received when you registered for this webinar will be operational until midnight this evening. So please enter the code you were given at checkout and you'll be able to view it for free. Second, I'd like to let you know how today's event will be structured. Jonathan and I will talk for about half an hour, and then we'll open the floor to questions, so at about 5:30. You can use the Q&A tool at the bottom of the video window to submit your questions to me, and I will ask them to the best of our ability. This cuts off at 5:45. And now I'd like to introduce Jonathan McHugh.
Hey, how are you today?
Hi, good. Just to let everyone know, Jonathan is a producer and director for J2 Films, a division of J2 Media. And in addition to directing Long Live Rock, he also is set to release the documentary Cosplay Universe. McHugh has produced more than 30 films and TV shows, including Justin Bieber Never Say Never and Snoop Dogg's Hood of Horror, and he runs the music supervision company Song Stew. So please welcome. Thanks, Jonathan. I'm good. How are you? Where are you right now?
Believe it or not, I'm in Kauai.
Oh, very nice. Wow.
Very far away.
Yes. Far from Boston. But I know you have connections to Boston, you mentioned.
Yes. As a matter of fact, my mom was from Boston, and she was a Boston author who published 4 novels for Doubleday, including a #2 bestseller. And both of her first 2 books, which were the bestsellers, were about Boston. Boston was a character in the film. It was about people coming back from World War II, living on the GI Bill and finding themselves after the war, So Boston's always been a character in my life because I've gone there ever since I was a little kid, going to whether it's Passover Seders or Hanukkah, visiting my family, spending time with my mom and Braddock books, riding the swan boats in the Common. And then when I was older, going to Red Sox games. So yeah, it's a wonderful town, and it's got a spirit like no other. And the Globe obviously is a world-class publication. So I just want to thank you guys for spotlighting our film.
Well, thank you for making such an interesting film with so much to think about and chew on in 80 minutes. It's really great. I was first going to just ask sort of how you fell onto heavy rock as a topic, because, it's something that I think is in a weird place in music right now, but I think it's still really, really popular. It's just kind of like immensely popular, yet weirdly under the radar.
It's an interesting thing. I mean, as far as how I fell into it, growing up as a kid, one of my first shows ever was Ted Nugent opening for Aerosmith at Providence Civic Center.
Wow.
And then I think my first show I think was Kiss and Mountain, or Blue Oyster Cult, I think it was, at the Nassau Coliseum. My second show was that show in New England. So I've always kind of been into it. And then obviously my third show was Led Zeppelin, which just changed everything for me at Madison Square Garden when I was a kid in 1977. So seeing Led Zeppelin just like opened it up for me. And then I've always kind of been a rock fan. But then as the years progress and you get into college radio and you get into the Grateful Dead, or you get into New Orleans music, or you get into singer-songwriters and you mature, the musical taste mature with you. But in 1991, I worked at Elektra Records, and we had the Black Album, which was Metallica's, biggest record ever.
Yeah.
And the stigma of trying to get Metallica, we worked in radio promotion with the producer of the film, Gary Spivak, and myself. And the stigma of trying to work Metallica at Top 40 Radio was a challenge. And I underline that word. People did not, even though the record was brilliant, Enter Sandman is the record I'm discussing, People did not want to play that record just because of the name of Metallica.
Right.
And it was a slog to get that record on the radio, but once it did, it cemented them as just the greatest rock band ever, since Led Zeppelin, that is, I should say. And then cut to 30 years later, Gary has a really great festival career going. He books all the top niche hard rock festivals, stuff like Aftershock in Sacramento, or Carolina Rebellion in Carolina, or this thing in Columbus, this big festival in Columbus. So when he booked Metallica for his 10th anniversary, I had pitched him before that on the fandom, because I was always when he would take me to these festivals, the amount of moshing and crowd surfing that was there was dwarfed any other show you've ever been to.
Yeah.
Like, these people go harder than anybody else, I think. And so we basically embarked on making this movie bootstrapping, so to speak, in the sense it's like, hey, let's just go to Columbus. We'll shoot a sizzle reel. We'll see if we can raise some money. We'll see if we get some interesting story. Because that's the beautiful thing about documentary. You can go in with a premise, and then that premise can be totally dwarfed by better ideas that come along, or better characters that come along. So he introduced me to some fans, these kids called the Party Crew, and they were amazing. And they introduced me to other great people. We shot a sizzle. But the interesting thing that happened that weekend was at 6:45 in the morning of the first day we were going to shoot, phone rings and it's Gary, and he says, Chris Cornell died last night.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, dude, we're supposed to interview him at 1:00 today. He's like, it ain't happening. So, the band had already been in Columbus, and so he never made it. And you showed up that morning at the stadium, and there was Soundgarden's name on the door, on the dressing room. And it was like, wow, this is really fresh. So I couldn't really start the interviews with Lars from Metallica or Tom Morello or Rob Zombie by, hey guys, isn't rock great? It's like, They just lost their guy, And I had worked with Chris 2 decades before when I was at A&M Records, and there was a movie called Basketball Diaries, Jim Carroll, based on Jim Carroll's book with Leo DiCaprio. And I brought the film to Seattle to show it to Soundgarden, and they loved it, and they wrote a song for the movie, which ended up in the movie. So I had worked with them before at A&M, and they were wonderful guys to deal with. So I was very saddened by that. And anyway, so in that interview process of talking to these people, you ended up with these really gut level 7 hours ago this guy died type of thing. Right. So we didn't even plan to use those. It wasn't part of the premise of the film, as I was saying. But then as we got into editing, and we were planning to interview Chester Bennington, and then he took his life. And it's like, okay, all of a sudden this is like too powerful. So we basically just added that segment that you saw and created that segment based on, a couple key counselors like Harold from Music Cares, a Grammy organization, Jeff Jampo, who's an amazing counselor, volunteer counselor, if you will. And so, that's the best laid plans of Mice and Men. You basically just in a doc, you can pivot and do different things. I mean, that's why the problem is when you see that movie, there's 80 minutes of stuff involved. There's only so much you could get in there, and that was one that took over and pushed other things out.
Right. I mean, it is really powerful because I feel like so much of the movie is about the fans and the way that they viscerally connect to this. And then, you kind of see that the pain that they share with the artists is very real as well. Like when the tribute to Chris happened at the festival, and it was just so, I mean, I'm somebody who, Soundgarden was one of my favorite bands growing up. And when I actually was talking to some friends about the movie last night, and we were talking about how Chris's death still is just so raw. And so, and it just seeing footage of him still hurts so much.
Yeah.
But I think that the connection that the fans and the bands have is really I feel like that's the star of the movie, I love how this film puts the fans and the artists on the same level.
Yeah, because they don't exist without each other. There are no bands unless the fans support them. And this pandemic has obviously been a proof positive to that. Merch sales are up for artists as their revenues go down. And so people who want to support the artists That's what it's the lifeblood of the business. And I think that, you'll see as everybody's so fired up to go back out there and do shows, you'll see it just take off like it never, obviously the COVID restrictions and all that are an issue.
Right.
But I think that, this is a format that doesn't get mainstream attention. It's pop, it's rap. It used to be EDM to some extent, country has its own niche, but the hard rock people, they're into their own thing. Like they don't want to necessarily be mainstream. I mean, maybe everybody wants to be mainstream, but being mainstream for them is kind of a sellout in a way. So it's the aesthetic of sellout still exists in this genre. Like Metallica's never doing a track with Taylor Swift. Even if they were like best friends, they could never do that because of that certain thing that just, you can't cross that line. Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting perspective that they have to have.
Yeah. Can you tell me more about how you so you mentioned the party crew. Was that the group of fans that were like on that couch that you got back to? They were really fun.
Yeah, I mean, that's a former corrections officer, a school teacher, an architect, a trauma nurse, and then obviously, the corrections officer led us to Gilkey, who was an inmate, and they would bond over music, and he would share music with them. And it's like, it takes, think about that relationship, the inmate correction officer, like everything is portrayed as such a dominant force, a negative between the two. And here these guys were like, he was sharing music with them. And I just love that metaphor. And then when they got out, he's like, I saw him at a festival, and I was like, if the guy's going to punch me or what, but he's like, hey, can I buy you a beer? You were always good to me. So that's kind of cool. I love that.
Yeah, that's really great. Can you tell us more about Abby McCormick, who was sort of she was like the emotional
what a gem
of so
what
much
a gem
of the movie. She had such great energy and
so the Abby story and the Michelle Sabaté, who her and her husband crowd surf on top of each other, right? So I found both of them in my footage. Like after the first shoot, you're like, wait, is that a woman in a wheelchair with one leg crowd surfing and coming out of her chair? Like, who is that? And one of my guys was like, oh, that's Abby. Let me get you her information. So I call her up and I say, hey, what's up? Where you at? And she says, well, I live in Gallatin, Tennessee. I said, well, I'm going to visit these other people in West Virginia and Ohio. So I'm on a route to you.
Yeah.
And so I went to see her in her trailer, and she's just awesome, and the spirit of her losing her fiance in a motorcycle accident, losing her leg. And then the first guy she falls in love with because he's got a badass Harley, It's like, wow, you can't write that kind of stuff going out there, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then Michelle Sabaté was interesting because I saw her crowd surfing on her husband. And I was like, okay, in films, you look for stuff you've never seen before. I've never seen that. I have seen wheelchair people surfing, that I've seen, crowd surfing. So I call up Michelle, and she's like, I said, hey, you going to agree at this next festival we're going to shoot at? She's like, yeah. I said, well, are you going to crowd surf with your husband? She's, yeah. I said, would you mind wearing some GoPros? She's like, I'll tell you what. She starts negotiating with me. She says, I really want to do a hamster ball fight with my husband to Godsmack crying like a bitch. And I'm like, okay, that's pretty specific.
Wow.
So she's like, if you help me smuggle in those hamster balls and get security to look the other way for those 2 minutes when I need to come out of the shoot, I'll do whatever you want. I'm like, okay. I'm like, Gary, how can we do? And luckily I'd interviewed the head of security already, because I was fascinated by how security works together. That was an interesting segment. Again, not planned.
I'm love
like,
that segment too.
Kind of like a ballet, right? There was a moment there in time where I was going to set their movements to ballet, and it just didn't quite get there. But the point is, they hire these football teams to work together, and one person grabs when they're coming off the crowd surfing, and one guy kicks out the feet, the other guy grabs, the other guy holds the other guy. And these are guys, big college football player types. So that was another segment that was really cool that we didn't see coming, and it just happened and it evolved. But yeah, those two people, Abby and Michelle, were people I just found through the party crew. And they just gave such good, they had such movement that you had to put them in, you had to feature them.
Yeah. The GoPro footage was also a really nice touch. Like, feeling like you were there and sort of.
You're in there, yeah. And the other GoPro shot I did, I put my cameraman who loves to rock also. I held his camera while he put the GoPro on and got into the mosh pit. That was super cool.
That's cool. Yeah, that was fun.
Anyway, that was fun.
What is like, I mean, I would imagine that given your background, you have a lot of experience going to festivals, although I know music festivals in the States are a little bit of a newer animal. But what was like shooting at this festival like? Like, can you,
Well, it was pretty crazy. It was pretty crazy because, all those interviews, pretty much I'd say 80% of those interviews took place at a festival. So that meant you were backstage.
Yeah.
You got a little trailer. We decked it out, for filming. And you would have X amount of guys scheduled, right? Because the rock stars have a schedule. But it's the best time to get them because they do have downtime at these festivals while they're sitting around waiting to go on. And so Gary would line these guys up every half hour or whatever. And then when I had a break, I'd be like, okay, take the other camera crew and go out in the field. Or I'd be like texting with the camera crew while I'm doing an interview. Okay, guys, I need this shot. Go get this live shot of this band, or find one of our party crew and shoot with them, So, and then I would just run out in the field and try to find them, connect with them, and then shoot. So I was, a maniac for 12 hours every day during the festival. So it was quite the endeavor, shall we say.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like the way that it's shot, it just, you feel like, I've been to large scale festivals like that before, but I really was impressed with how like in the place you felt as a result of watching the movie.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing. The movie is for the fans. So, and we released it on the 1 year of the lockdown so that people could really remember what it was like and look forward to the future. And the goal was, it's not a reviewer type film, it's a fan film.
Yeah.
And because you do cover, people were like, how come you just didn't stay with Abby the whole time? Like, she's so great. I'm like, absolutely. And then I would have left out security. I would have left out the whole depression, anxiety, death of Chris Cornell, death of Chester Bennington. So it's like, yeah, I would have loved to do all that, but I wanted to cover the stuff that I think the fans really, what makes the genre. And also that the bands love doing these festivals because it's like summer camp for them. They get to see buddies they never get to see, and they get to hang out backstage and bond a little bit because they're always on the road on the tour buses, moving every different way across the world.
We Live on the Bus, the one kid who thought that
oh my God, I love that. How do you not include that? Skillet people. Yeah. And they're like a Christian rock band, but they're beautiful. They're wonderful people.
Yeah.
And she is a hardcore woman who just rocks. But they bring up their kids with the great Christian values, and and the bus is their life. They own, I think, 1 or 2 of those buses.
Yeah.
And they, in a perfect world, they'll spend 7 months a year on those buses, just hitting it. They're making a living. It's fantastic.
Yeah. I know that you work in music supervision, so you have a lot of musical knowledge. I was wondering if, while you were doing all this running around, if there were any sort of bands that you discovered, because I was surprised. I was actually happy to see certain acts like Dorothy, for example. I think Dorothy has just been one of the best bands out there for so long, and Dorothy herself is just such a force of nature. And I was wondering if there were any sort of discoveries that you made while.
Yeah, I mean, Dorothy was a great discovery for me. And what was a really great discovery is women empowerment in rock. And the 2 stories I'll tell is, one is that Dorothy interviewed her the first year along with many other people. It's all good. And then again, we're going back to these festivals every 5 months and 6 months as we keep shooting. Second time we saw her, my producer Gary is lining up all these interviews, and he's like, yeah, I saw Dorothy. She didn't really even remember the interview. I was like, what? He goes, yeah, she was drinking back then and now she's sober. I was like, okay, let's interview her again. So she and I start talking, and I start telling her about my best friend I grew up with, who's been battling alcoholism for 12, 13 years now. Just a disaster, and hopefully better now. But so basically we both started crying during the interview. It was like talking about the sobriety and how important it is to get to. And so Dorothy was amazing. And then also just spending time with Lizzie Hale and Maria Brink from In This Moment, Lizzie Hale from Hailstorm. I went to a show. There was an all-female tour. It was New Year's Day, In This Moment. hailstorm. They toured all over the country, did theaters. They were playing the Warfield in San Francisco. I flew up there and spent the day with Lizzie, went to her in-store. And this girl came up to her and said, I've never been to a concert before. I want to save my first show for you. Her name was also Lizzie. Another just beautiful moment. So again, I didn't really know a lot of these bands. I just wasn't, I knew the big ones, but I didn't know Greta Van Fleet. Like I thought like that was a woman. I didn't know who that was because again, this is when Greta Van Fleet is just starting to come up.
Yeah.
And then, I go see them and I'm like, wow, this band's like a little too Led Zeppelin for me, but yet I could see the young women are into it. So it's good for rock and roll. And then as their music keeps evolving, they're just amazing. Their new album's amazing. So yeah, I got turned on to a lot of great stuff and Gary is a great producer because he would always just flood my inbox with great new stuff, like Greta and all these great bands. Another great band called Radkey, three brothers, African-American guys. This band Fever 333, Stephen Harrison's in the film. They're a little bit Rage Against the Machine-ish. They're super dope. There's just a lot of great music out there. And because it's not in the mainstream, it's hard to find. And you have to find the curators to help, And Allison Hagendorf, who runs rock music at Spotify, is a great one. If you want to follow her, she really is a person that will set you in the right direction about this great music. And she loves the female empowerment side of it too. So she's always talking about new, both male and female rock bands.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, when I was growing up, actually my first concert was also at Nassau Coliseum. It was,
oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah. Motley Crue and Warrant in 1988.
Wow. So you grew up rocking a little bit, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, that's why. And the scene with Lizzie and Lizzie was so moving to me because it was really great to see, so many female artists representing. I mean, back in, when I was in high school, there was Vixen and there was Lita Ford, obviously, and there were people like Doro Pesch, but it wasn't as, I don't know, it didn't seem as widespread as it does today.
Yeah, and someone like Lizzie Hale gives props, his tour with Lita Ford and Joan Jett and all the women that came before them. That make them push to do what they do. And Lizzie's a great model to keep that whole thing rolling, and that's a beautiful thing, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Were there any, obviously putting aside the Chris Cornell, was there anything else that sort of surprised you as you were gathering footage and sort of diving into the proverbial mosh pit of rock fandom?
I mean, surprise, like I said, I think that all those different things of, I never thought about the concept of using hard rock for therapy. And then when I read that study that was published, an Australian researcher at the University of, I think it was Wales or Northwest Wales, whatever, published a study about what they call metalheads in Australia, who are basically just rock fans. They followed them through the years, and some of the things that I found were really interesting, like the fact that bullies, would always single out a metal type kid, right, if he's by himself, or just kind of an outcast. But all of a sudden, once that kid finds his people, his tribe, and they all of a sudden are together and they put on their Metallica shirts and they pierce their whatevers and then have their hair long or tattoos and whatever, then all of a sudden the flip happens and the bullies become afraid of them and they walk the other way. And that just blew me away that was a thing, which makes sense actually. But the music is therapy and helping people find their tribe is interesting. It's like cosplay. It's like my other film, Cosplay. What I learned from that is that, the first time I went to cosplay, I wrote and produced a movie with Snoop Dogg and we went to promote it at Comic-Con. And I was like, wait, why are all these people dressed up? It's not Halloween. It's not Mardi Gras. Can you explain this to me? And then I jumped into that fandom years later and learned how this transformative fandom of cosplay exists, and Comic-Cons are their rock festivals, right? They get to parade around and go to these festivals and commune with their people and dress up in other, women's costumes, or men dressing up as women, or vice versa. So there's a unique blend to both of these subculture films, and that's why they ended up, basically Cosplay Universe hasn't come out yet because it's had 2 bankruptcies and a pandemic, but that was the first film. And then Long Live Rock, I got the money based on that because they were like, oh, what's your next film? And I said, well, I'm doing another film about subculture film. And they're like, oh, let me see it. So I showed them some scenes from Long Live Rock, and they wrote us a check to be able to have another film. This is this company Q Media that went bankrupt from England. So you just never know how things happen. And because I did Long Live Rock, I met the mayor of Louisville, and he brought me in to do the City of Ali movie documentary I'm producing, which was just announced today in Variety, which is coming out next month. So, you just do things for a reason because you love it. And then, you follow your passion, and then you never know what comes of it. Sometimes nothing, sometimes a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, that is a good ethos to have, I think. Have any of your subjects seen the documentary yet? Have you gotten any feedback?
Yeah, they loved it. They loved it. They, the party crew was just like, they're stars for a day. You know what I mean? They're able to be stars for a day, and they're able to show this to their people, and just they're on the poster. Abby's on the poster, and they're just, it's a beautiful thing to be able to make the common man a star. You know what I mean? That's kind of cool. And that's why documentaries are amazing, and reality TV to some extent can do that for people, for the right people.
I would imagine that it must be extra powerful to see right now, given that live music has been out of the picture now for, about 14 months for the most part.
Yeah, it's been frustrating because this is a movie that when you see this movie, we screened this movie a couple places. We screened this movie in Columbus for the cast and crew. Uh-huh. And people were jumping out of their seats and screaming, right? Because that's the core. And then we screened it at the Grammy Museum right before the pandemic in LA. And, a couple different agencies for research, CAA, William Morris. They have beautiful screening rooms in California, in LA. But, on a big screen, it really plays different. And it's kind of like my daughter not being able to have her senior year at high school, and a washout at college first year, just terrible. You can't really interact with people. And it's kind of like that. I have to suffer the fact that my movie can't be on the big screen, much like all these other people have to suffer through their lives and dealing with the Zoom of it all. And it's very frustrating. But if you can bring some joy into people's lives during this miserable time, then that's the sacrifice. You know what I mean? It just is what it is. Everybody's got to suck it up and deal with the way it is. But to see this movie, I have a dream that, like Rocky Horror, I did this movie called Repo the Genetic Opera.
Oh yeah.
And Repo the Genetic Opera was it was for the guy. It was like Rocky Horror for the guy. Do midnight shows of that movie, and you see people dress up as characters that you worked on, and they sing along to it, and it's a beautiful thing. So someday maybe we'll do midnight shows with Long Live Rock as the short story there.
I was also thinking about how I don't know if you ever went to the Orion Festival. Did you ever know about that? That was Metallica's festival that they had for 2 years in the early 2010s. But Lars, each member of Metallica had a pavilion dedicated to their interests. So there was classic car for James. There was a horror movie memorabilia for Kirk. Skating ramp for Robert, and then Lars had a film tent, and he screened movies. So that could be also a really
that's super cool
idea for any rock festivals that are going on. If they want people to beat the heat. Yeah,
that's a good point. Good point.
Cool. Well, why don't we take some audience questions? Anyone watching, if you have a question, you can use the Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Our first question is from Betsy Whitemore, and she wanted to know if any storylines got edited out for time.
Fantastic question, Betsy. Yes, storylines, not so much, but depth of story. I followed Jess. I followed Abby. I followed Jess, who's a trauma nurse who loves to fish. Her zen is crowd surfing and fishing. Yeah. And I spent a lot more time with her fishing. And literally, we went to the fishing store. We met her fishing mentor. We fished with these old dudes, and it was fascinating to me because here's this super hard rock, tatted up chick, trauma nurse who does these 16-hour shifts. And when she's not crowd surfing, she's in the stream. and she carries a 45 pistol because she's in West Virginia, and you all might have seen a movie called Deliverance back in the day, for protection. Carries a 45 in her waistband. And she's just badass. And like, I loved spending time with her, energy and attitude. And I had a lot more with her that I had to cut based on time. And like I said, all these other things that come into competing interests. So more deeper dive of characters, I think, is a thing that gets sacrificed when you're trying to tell a number of different tales, within an 80-minute film, keeping it to that parameter of time frame. So yeah, that was one thing, a little more depth of character I would have liked to have.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I also was, interested in how you sort of like decided to sequence the film, because like it did kind of like the narrative just did kind of flow really naturally with, one person talking about a topic and then that being the sort of like, going from one topic to another really naturally. Like, did that all come together in editing? Did you have an idea of
Yeah,
how-
that process is laborious. Like,
Yeah.
you sit with a board, right? And they have cards, note cards on there, and you kind of move each scene as a note card. You move each scene around, and how does this go with this? And then what's the segue into that next scene? Like, how is it, how does it go together? And so you have all these different pieces. Then you do research screenings, and we screened it probably 5 different times over the course of a year, and basically got feedback like, that scene's too long, that scene's too short, that scene doesn't go well with that scene. So you take all that feedback, and then at the end of the day, you say, okay, I believe this is the best path. But they say about the documentary, it comes together in editing, and it's true, because you can have all the greatest material, but if it's not sequenced well and sourced well, it's very hard to make a cohesive narrative film out of it. And that is a true challenge as a first-time director, to be able to make, or any director, to be, you see movies that sometimes just don't work. They might be all there, but they're just, for some reason, they don't hang together. And it's a real thing. It's a real process. People think it's easy, but it is not. It's a difficult process to put it all together and make it work.
Yeah, especially if you have so much material, like you were saying earlier, that, is really compelling and can be something that, is very, like, is worthy.
Yeah, you have hundreds of hours of footage to pull through, and then you weed it down to tens of hours, and you're looking to do an hour and 20-minute film. So it's a lot to be able to scale and put together. But it's, like I said, that's what the process of it is. That's what filmmaking is, really.
Yeah. When did you wrap on this? When did you finish shooting this movie?
Let's see. So the pandemic started in February. So we were wrapped, I would say, by August.
Mm-hmm.
And we were in process of getting the film. We had a one-night worldwide 500 screen cinema release lined up, right, to go on the big screen all across the globe.
Yeah.
And we'd been working on that for a year and a half. And that distributor had come to, who's an old friend of mine who works in a big distribution company, event cinema company, and he'd come to like 2 or 3 of the research screenings. Like, he was there with me the whole time. So we're negotiating the deal in January, and then February hits and it starts to get shaky. And then March hits, and it's like, no cinemas for the next year.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Tommy, sorry, dude, we got to figure out a new plan. And then at the same time, this distributor, Abramarama, who I've known Evan Saxon for years and Richard Abramowitz for years, and they're like, to me, one of the premier documentary distribution companies in the game, especially in the music space. So they were into the film, and they were willing to put up some money to help get it out in the world and put their staff behind it. So we did a pandemic release, shall we say.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. 1 year later, we built it up to the 1-year anniversary of the lockdown.
Yeah. It's interesting because like there are some, I feel like there have been some interesting changes in, just the wider musical landscape since then. Like, and one of them was Machine Gun Kelly, who, just put out a punk record.
So this is a great one. So Machine Gun Kelly, I'd never heard of, right?
Uh-huh.
I mean, I heard of him a little bit, but Gary's like, yeah, this guy's starting to get popular, and kind of a rapper, but he's rocking. I'm like, all right, get him in. He shows up, he's smoking a fat joint, he's super high, and he just was so much fun and such a great guy, had great vibe. And then obviously by the time the movie gets done and out, the guy's done the video with what's her name, that Megan Fox, and he just blasts off into the stratosphere. And now he's got his new film that he put together, which is great. And he's a superstar, you know what I mean? So, and Greta Van Fleet, by the way, we first interviewed Greta Van Fleet, they were like side stage 2 o'clock. You know, by the time the film comes out, they're like main stage 6 o'clock. And, you know, you watch these bands grow, and it's, you know, it's a great thing to see that you're part of, you know, you're part of that trajectory. It's fun.
Yeah, for sure. You talked a little bit earlier about your own rock fandom. How do you think it's evolved since the days of NASA Coliseum existing, first of all, but also just like, you know, like, how do you think it's changed over the years?
I think back then there was like two musics, right? There was disco in the 70s or whatever, 80s, and there was rock. And you were either a disco person or you were a rock person. There wasn't kind of an in between. In the world we live in today, very much musically niched. There's so many different subgenres, and there's a station for everything on XM Sirius, or there's radio stations for everything, or there's Spotify playlists for everything. So this is just another one of those niche things that's off-putting to many people, but also other people love it. You know, the hardcore fans love it. And again, I wouldn't say, like, when they start screaming, the super screaming hard guitar, I'm not really there for it. But, you know, you give me some melody, some guitar, great song, I'm in all the way. You know, one of my favorite bands is actually Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah.
And they put this energy out there. And that's like, I tell people, I don't remember the Clash, maybe seeing the Clash and certain bands throughout history, Zeppelin, that energy live is just so good. And it's like a drug for me. And if you could get that energy, like, that was the only time with Rage that I almost jumped in the mosh pit. I was standing on the edge and I had this moment, like, I was all hyped up. I'm like, nah, I'm too old for that. Don't do that. You can hurt yourself. You catch an elbow to the nose, you'll be done. So yeah, I love the energy of rock music. I just think it's fantastic. I'm a fan of a lot of different genres, that being one of them. But again, when you're a filmmaker, you just put your subject, you know, you put your camera on the lens on people and see what comes up. And I just thought that this was kind of a misunderstood, much like cosplay, same thing. People kind of view these people as freaks, cosplayers, and people dressing up like that, and these hard rock looking, off-putting people. I mean, even the act of banging your head with long hair and facial hair and tattoos, it's like, whoa, check out that guy. But it's the ultimate expression, right? It's the ultimate fandom of, like, that music is moving you so much that you're gonna, you know, I can't even hurt you to do it. I got neck issues. So, yeah, I can't do that. Now I gotta go take some Advil after that. But yeah, so it's just funny to see all the different things. But, you know, again, it's like shining a light. And as friends of mine who said to me, you know, I have a whole different appreciation for these people now, you know, these fans, because of, you know, you just don't know until, and that's what's great about that hour and 20-minute doc world. You can just dive into something, learn a whole bunch of stuff, get some new perspective perhaps, and move on, you know, with a better knowledge.
Yeah, that's really true. I also think it's interesting that, like, the festival, like, I feel like there's a convergence between, like, the sort of festival world and also the phenomena that you were talking about earlier about how people linking together can, you know, be stronger against any forces that are aligning against them. Because now with festivals, you know, it used to be like, okay, well, Motley Crue's coming to Long Island, Motley Crue's then going to Boston, but now there are these spaces for everyone to converge, and so, like, people can meet from across geographic lines and across, you know, time zones or even country borders, and it makes the fandom, and I think this is true for Comic-Con as well, it makes it a lot more potent and a lot more focused.
Well, it's culturally, what happens is, you know, these, like, for example, you look at the Party Crew, they don't all live in the same city.
Yeah.
Columbus, Ohio, Louisville, Kentucky, Lexington, Kentucky, Wheeling, West Virginia, Cincinnati, Ohio. You know, my guy is also in, you know, like, so these people come, they meet, they connect, they camp together, RV or regular, and they spend the whole weekend together. And that's it. They may pair up 2s, 4s, whatever. They have group meals, they have group drinks, they have kegs, whatever they do. And that communing of a destination festival is why festivals win. Coachella, all these festivals, people come from all over the world to attend these festivals. And, I know like our family right before we took the whole family with 3 families to Outside Lands in San Francisco in Golden Gate Park, which is an amazing festival.
Yeah.
They spent the whole weekend together with all 15 people, trying to be together as much as possible. And destination festivals are just an amazing thing of getting people together and giving a platform and an excuse to get people together and hang and see some great music.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have about 5 minutes left. I think this automatically cuts off at, excuse me, at 5:45. If anybody has a question, there's one in the chat. This is a good question. This is from Laura Buffone. She wants to know, did you feel welcomed into the groups of people that you talked to?
That's a great question, Laura. Because it is like when you're a filmmaker, you're an outsider, right? So it's a question of you don't know these people, but someone like Gary Spivak, who is an insider, is in that game. He's the guy that books these festivals. He knows the crew. And if you're walked in by someone like that, it's a much better shot. It's always that insider connection that makes life good. It's like when you don't know somebody, but somebody can get you to somebody, and then all of a sudden you're looked at a whole day. They may never take your calls, and all of a sudden someone says, "Hey, will you talk to this guy?" Yeah. Boom, it's a whole different conversation. So having that vouch for or co-sign, as they say in today's world, is super important. And that was Gary for me in the rock space. But again, they're lovely people. Like, that's the other thing. Like, you think these rockers are going to be hard and angry, and they're not. They're just like beautiful people like everybody else. They just make a living doing this. You know what I mean? So that's what's kind of cool. And again, the moral to the whole story is you don't judge a book by its cover. You don't just say these people are this way and that's it. You can't do that. That whole generalistic thing in our society is like, cancel these people because they're that. You have to kind of be open and looking at everybody and seeing what's inside them.
Yeah. And I will say, like, the interviewees also, like, to a person, just you were able to evoke like such charisma and such warmth from them, like especially like Rob Zombie. I thought was just I would
fantastic.
I'd called
the guy was fantastic,
but he was.
He's a true showman. He's like,
yeah.
And he to the aesthetic of remaining true to the game. He just does his thing. He loves movies too, so he's built himself a film directing career. He loves horror movies, and that's his thing, man. He goes and makes horror films, and like he's happy just being that guy. He doesn't need to be a shiny tool on the morning show, TV. That's what I love about those people. Who stay, and it's good. It's a good note for everybody. Stay true to who you are. That's super important. Yeah,
that is extremely important. And I think that's actually a great note to end on, since we have like a minute and a half left. Do you have any final thoughts for it?
No, I just want to thank Maura and the staff of the Globe for putting this together, and Evan and everybody at Brahmarama for linking us together. I think it's beautiful what you guys are doing, and National Amusements for, theater chains. Everybody should go out and support them and every theater chain they can out there in the world, so movies get back online. And don't just think you should watch movies on your TV, because it sucks compared to watching it on the big screen. So yeah, get out and watch movies, and hopefully concerts soon too. So thanks again for your time. Appreciate it, Maura.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. This was really fun. The movie is Long Live Rock. If you bought a ticket to the seminar, you can watch it through the National Amusements link in the email that you received.
Yeah, and then also and then on June 1, it'll be up on iTunes also. Or you can just go to longliverockmovie.com and rent the movie there also. Plenty of chances to see it.
Plenty of chances.
Spread the word if you like it. Spread the word, because it's all about social media.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Thanks. Enjoy your vacation.
All right, guys. Be good.